Hey, welcome back to Gold Scratch. So, what's worse, a street camshaft and a race motor, or a race camshaft and a street motor? Both are pretty bad. And today I got Bill Little with me again today. Everybody watching my channel knows Bill. They love Bill, and he's going to help me out here. Bill's going to talk about the thought process to build a motor with a race motor and how he picks a camshaft for a race motor. I'm going to come back what the differences are for a street motor, and we're going to debate it a little bit. So, as I've said many times on previous videos, knowledge is power, experience is expensive, but YouTube's changed all that. You can gain knowledge and experience just by watching YouTube videos. There's lots of smart guys out there. I'll mention a couple: Ben Alameda, David Vizard, Brian Salter, Powell Engineering, Cutter's Performance, also in Canada, who regularly provide you with the benefits of their knowledge and experience. And it's free to watch, but it's not free to make videos. It's free to watch them, but it's not free to make videos. It takes time, it costs money, and that's why we all need you to help us out by doing everything you can. Subscribe, like, share. Because when you do that, YouTube's pretty smart. They figure out if you like that video, they'll show it to other people with similar interests, and that's how channels can grow. So, and to make this make sense, that has to happen. Right now, Bill's not building any engines, and neither am I. We're making videos, so we have to make that make sense. So, back to the subject at hand. Camshafts are, I mentioned before, the brains of an engine. They're probably the hardest decision to get exactly right on any engine build. A lot of other things, you just follow the process. Camshafts is a lot trickier. So I'm going to let Bill talk about the process that he uses to pick a race cam. Bill builds street engines too, but he builds a lot of race motors. I don't. So he can do a way better job of that. And I'm going to come back with some of the thinking and thought process that I use to build a street cam. Then we're going to kind of debate the differences and anybody watching this can benefit from knowledge and experience of others without having to learn the hard way like we did, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Bill, let me turn it over to you and give us what you got here.
Okay. So. Thanks, Alan. So is there a perfect race cam? Is there a race cam that I can tell you that'll fit in everything? No. Every engine is different. Every engine has different cylinder head flow. A lot of it's cylinder head flow, a lot of it's low lift cylinder head flow. The better the cylinder head flows at lower valve lifts, the less overlap you need. And that's where people make a mistake a lot of times. So if you have a stock cylinder head and you're running stock eliminator, you're limited. You can't do a lot of porting and stuff. You typically run a cam probably, on a 350 engine, it would be 258, 268 or something on a 105 lobe separation, because the head does not flow very well. You need that overlap area to make power. You can't make power without overlap, so you have to get it somehow. And if you look at a lot of the modern cylinder heads, they flow so good up to 200 and 300. That's why they can stand a 112 or a 114 lobe separation, because you're getting the air a different way. If you look at a 4-valve engine, the guys next door, they run an Ecotech 4-cylinder. It makes 436 horsepower, 170 cubic inches, basically 174 cubic inches. I flowed their cylinder heads, and that cylinder head flows for every 100 thou lift, it flows 100 CFM more. So we start out at 100. It's 100 CFM, 200, 200 CFM, 300, 300. So it really comes on strong. And when we had their engine on the dyno, it wanted like a 112 intake center line and like a 120 exhaust center line. There's hardly any overlap on that, but that's because the heads flow so well. So keep that in mind. It's the cylinder head flow, okay? The next thing is, when you build a race motor, it's cam, gears, and converter. You have to know those three things before you start, because that will dictate the RPM range that you're going to be running in. So if you have a 6,000 stall converter and you're only going to rev the engine to 6,000, That's not going to work, right? So you have to have a plan ahead of time. Like I've always said, have a plan before you start. The next thing to look at is compression ratio. And the higher the compression ratio, the wider the lobe separation can be. The reason for that is because you don't have as much combustion chamber volume to have to scavenge because you have a dome in there. So, people think compression it makes power by, compressing the mixture. That's only part of it. But if you have the dome in the chamber during overlap, you might have, like on a big block, 12.8 to 1 compression, you got a 43 cc dome. So subtract 43 cc's from 119 combustion chamber. That's a lot smaller than what a flat top piston would be, you see. So, you just don't have the volume of exhaust to have to scavenge. So that comes into play. Port size. If you have big ports, and big ports go with high compression usually, because the compression ratio, that dome on the piston actually pulls harder on the intake mixture during the intake stroke. That's why you can get airspeed up and use a bigger port. If it's a smaller port, well, that changes everything too. Then you can close up the lobe separation angle and gain a little more overlap, so you can scavenge that cylinder. There's so many things that come into play here. Now, after 45 or 50 years of doing this, you learn eventually what certain engines want. Like if it's a 565 naturally aspirated, it's going to be 284, 285 at 50 on the intake and 296 on the exhaust on a 112 or 113, maybe even 114, and probably 750 to 850 lift. And that's a given. It doesn't matter whose cam you use. If you use it in that range, the thing will make power. So, it gets kind of easy after you find a combination. You don't have to really, really work on it. But for you guys out there, I would actually buy a desktop dyno or a dynamation program like I have, and we can do some screenshots on it later, maybe, so that I'll show you some stuff. But you can play with the timing figures, the compression ratios, and it'll get you close. And it usually tells you, it won't give you the exact power the engine will make, but it'll tell you if it's the right direction. And if you do something with the cam timing and it goes the other way for average horsepower, you better be changing it. And a lot of times I will go in and I will move the 4 timing figures. Intake open, intake close, exhaust open, intake and exhaust close. And I will move 1 figure at a time, maybe a couple degrees, and see what it does. And I can spend 2-3 hours doing it, and it kind of gives me an idea, because that, if you're doing something with a different cylinder head, like if you're doing a Ford or a Chrysler, they're a little bit different too. So, I'm not that smart, but I've learned to use certain tools to get by, and you guys can do it too, and experience too. You have to listen to people, but there's not an ultimate cam. That's what I'm trying to say here. So valve lift is dependent upon the cylinder head. Valve lift is horsepower. Okay. The more valve, while it's horsepower up top, valve lift will also give you more torque, because you're opening the valve quicker, because the valve has to move. Because if you have a 500 lift cam and you figure out, the area around that lobe, and then use a 750 lift cam, that lifter's moving fast. The valve's moving faster, so it helps to stay up with the piston speed, right? So all this comes into play, and you can actually overcam an engine very easily. Usually valve lift won't hurt you if you keep the duration fairly regular or small. The problem with valve lift is it's hard on the valve train, and you got to have good springs, good rockers, and you will break stuff with high valve lift, just because of the velocities are a lot faster. So that's my take on a race cam. Later on, we'll show you some stuff on the dynamation. I've got a crane book here that we're going to show you, and I have some stuff from David Vizard that I got way back in 2014 when we went to a PRI show, and I went to a seminar and I met him. And this chart is right on. You cannot go wrong with this. I guarantee you. Okay. I've there's more than one way to get to a certain point. The only thing he doesn't include in here is the actual cylinder head flow and stuff. That has to come into play a little bit too. And the application is different too. If you're building a tractor pull motor, it's totally different than a drag race motor. Those guys are like 7,500 RPM as soon as they open the throttle, and they need horsepower. People think it's torque, but no, they need RPM to get the wheel speed up. Drag car is the other way. Drag car needs some torque to accelerate through the RPM range, right? Stock car racing, that's totally different. NASCAR is running between 8,000 and 9,000 RPM most of the time, right?
Yep.
And I've heard stories where their camshafts won't live at 6,000 RPM, but they'll live at 9,000 RPM because it's tuned for that RPM range.
Yeah, right.
Yep. And the valve spring does something goofy, right?
I have to check with my buddy Brian Hambley about that. He's my NASCAR guy.
Yep, you check him.
He'd have the answer to that question.
Yeah,
sure,
I think that would be interesting.
I'll talk to him about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my take on race cams. It's not easy, but it's not terribly difficult either if you have some knowledge. That's it for me.
Okay, Bill. Well, I'll try to pick up from there. So most things you heard Bill say, forget about them if you're building a street motor, because
yes.
Most of it doesn't apply. The number one priority when Bill's building an engine is to make the most horsepower over time. You got a quarter mile or an eighth of a mile.
That's right.
And you need to get the most amount of horsepower, work done. Horsepower is work done per minute, okay?
Yep.
And you need to get the most done in that period of time. That's number one priority. You're not going to win any races, right? So in a street motor, it's not the same. Yes, you want performance. Of course, everybody does. Everybody wants to improve the performance. But there's a lot of other factors. So the things that I look at, and I've talked about this before, I try to match the camshaft with, number one, the engine, and then the car, and then the driver. So let's talk about the engine first. So if you have, one of the things I mentioned many times, if you have a big cam, you need lots of compression. If you have lots of compression, you need a big cam for a street motor anyway. That doesn't necessarily apply to a drag racing motor, but for a street motor. So that's important. And so typically to match the cam to the rest of the engine, the other thing is, if you got a cam that has 600 thousandths lift and you got a cylinder head that stops flowing at 500 thousandths, it's not going to perform very well. So all the things have to go together: your intake flow, your camshaft, your compression, and all that stuff. So one of the things that we do first is calculate the cranking compression and then work back from there. You need to know your static compression, dynamic compression. You can do all this by just going online to Summit and just Google it, and the answer will come up, Bing or whatever. We'll figure it out for you.
Even on a race motor.
Even on a race motor, probably.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure it will.
It's the same.
Say, hey.
Yes, that's a good point. Right.
So that information is available. Like I said before, the magic of YouTube, you don't have to learn everything the hard way. There's all kinds of, you can watch our videos, which we want you to do, of course, right? But there's other ways too. So we look at starting with cranking compression when we're trying to match the cam to the engine. And that is, it's subjective, 180 cranking PSI after the rings are broken in. So that I think is a safe number to run an engine on pump gas. And guys run more. There's guys that comment on my channel, I have 220 PSI. Difference is, once I turn an engine over to a customer, I don't know where it's going to go or what's going to happen to it. I can't control any of those things, so I'm sticking to my 180 PSI. The other thing that is kind of a rule of thumb that I use, if your cam makes more horsepower than torque, it's probably not a street cam. If it makes more torque than horsepower, it probably is a good street cam, because on the street, you need torque more than total horsepower. Where is the engine going to spend its life, right? It's not going to spend it at maximum RPM where it makes the most power. So that's always a consideration. And whenever we go to the dyno Daryl always brings me down to earth. Quit talking about maximum horsepower, maximum torque. Look at average horsepower, because when you step on the gas, if you got you're cruising at 3,000 RPM in your hot rod street car, and you stomp on the gas, what do you feel? Okay, you feel torque at first, okay, and making horsepower as the RPM goes up. That's what you're going to feel. So that's what I try to provide for you if I'm building an engine. So those are some of the considerations. There's always more. Intake, center line, all that kind of stuff, overlap, the lobe separation angle. There's lots of discussion about it. In the end, lobe separation is all about overlap, getting over. The end result is overlap. Lobe separation angle is just a means to an end. So keep that in mind. So that's a couple points on matching it to the engine. So now we got to match it to the car. So if you put a 327 in an Impala and with a big cam in it, it wouldn't perform very well. So one of the things you want to have for a good hot rod, you don't want more than 10 pounds of car per cubic inch or per foot-pounds of torque. Or if you do, you better put a pretty mild cam in it, because it won't be much fun to drive. And the next thing is your gear ratio. Gear ratio is a torque multiplier. If you're lacking torque, gear ratio is a way to get it back. So good example, I'll use my Camaro for example, 252 first gear, 355 rear end, that's 8.9 torque multiplication in first gear. That's kind of the low end of it, actually. You want to at least have 9-to-1 if you want to have a nice performing hot rod on the street. No more than 10 pounds of car per cubic inch. And then you work back to your camshaft from there. So that's another factor. And the other thing is the driver. Okay, how is he going to drive it? If your wife's going to take the kids to play soccer in that engine, that car, you probably don't want a camshaft that operates best between 5,000 and 7,000 RPM, right? You want to have something that's going to work for them. So those are the three of the things. The other thing is, in my case anyways, is cost, because roller cams are awesome. I love them. They take the whole anxiety of the startup away. But they cost a lot of money. When you go to a roller cam, you got to use the roller lifters, or link bar lifters are expensive. Now you need shorter push rods, you need bigger valve springs, you need a way to contain the thrust. All that costs money. So adding a roller cam to an engine is expensive. And on a street engine, my kind of rule of thumb is in the range of 220 to 230 degrees duration, a half an inch lift or so. A flat tappet cam can perform just as good as a roller cam. If you're going to go big numbers, go higher RPM, yeah, the roller cam definitely takes over and runs away with it. But on a street engine, you can make as much performance with a flat tappet cam. You have that anxiety of the startup, so it's one of the other factors is risk. If you don't want to have to worry about that, then put a roller cam in it from the beginning and you won't have that anxiety. So I've made videos about how to break in a flat tappet cam. There's a whole bunch of detail in the process that I follow. And the last thing I do is hold my breath for the first 5 minutes because you still never know what's going to happen next. So it's always a concern. And if you lose a lifter on a flat tappet cam, you don't just lose the cam, you lose the whole engine, because it all has to be rebuilt again. So it's pretty serious consequences. So those are some of the factors. Match it to the engine, match it to the car, match it to the driver. And once again, cost is a consideration. Performance, the issue we just had with Tony Guzzo's. We had, basically took a poll out there to see what people thought about the proper selection of a camshaft. And most of the response was, which one makes the most power? Bill picked the one that would make the most power. We know that. But that's not all the factors. Tony wants his car to be original. He wants it to be correct. And he wants a solid flat tappet cam because that's the way it was built. Yeah. So there's always other subjective factors.
And the cost of that flat tappet cam is not going to be cheap, because we're having it nitrided and we're using tool steel lifters. So it's going to be up there in price also.
Yeah, he probably could have put a roller in this case.
Darn close to it.
But Tony wants that, and it was actually his pick, and I think it's going to make, of all the other cams, not including the roller, it's probably going to make the best power.
I think so too.
And so it was a good pick, but that engine's not going to be cheap. We can't take a chance on using anything but the very best parts in it, and that's why we're still waiting on the nitride.
It should be here
That type of
soon, I hope.
camshaft. So those are some of the factors that you have to take into consideration, that I do. And as Bill said, there's no magic number. There's no camshaft that always works good for everybody in every situation. You got to take all these factors into consideration: the driver, the car, the engine. It all has to kind of work together to make sense. And in the end, it's got to be fun. A street engine's got to be fun to drive.
Yeah.
Race engines don't have that issue, right? As long as they can make it to the starting line, that's all they really care about, right?
Yeah.
And get their burnout done before they have to go. So that's the difference. So a lot of things that Bill looks at that he has to emphasize. He builds engines for mostly drag racers. They want to win. If they win, it's a successful project, right?
Yeah.
Not the same priority for me. So
no, when I had my 74 Nova, I raced it, but I also drove it down to the track, and I had a 400 in it at that point, and stall converter, gear. But that thing on the street, when I nailed it from a standstill, I'd get about 6 feet of rubber, and the thing would just bite and go, and it ran 1170s.
right?
And it felt fast through each gear. Like it felt fast right from the get-go, you know, and no wheel spin. So I had enough cam in it just so that
take the bottom end of it
take
out.
some of the bottom end so it would hook. That's another thing. A car is no fun on the street if you're spinning the tires all the time. You can't use it. It's useless, you know.
Well, we just had that discussion. We were talking about Bill's building some great big engines here right now, 800 horsepower jobs with, you know, he's built 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. Anybody watching this that wants 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, the limitation of your torque is not what comes off your flywheel. It's when your tire spins. Once your tire spins, the torque's not going to go any higher than that. That's all it's going to be. So
that's right.
So think about that when you want 1,000 foot-pounds. You better have a way of getting 1,000 foot-pounds of torque to the ground, and you're going to have a tough time doing that on a street.
Oh, really hard. You're not going to put it to the ground.
You're not going to get it to the ground. So cool and everything, but anyway, we just had that discussion. 400 to 500 horsepower for a straight engine. My thinking anyway is in the sweet spot. So that's what we kind of usually aim for. So
you're trying to hook all that power probably with 50 square inches of rubber on the ground. So remember that part. That's important.
Limitation of torques when the tires start spinning.
Yes.
Nothing to do with what's at the flywheel.
No, that's right. It's just bragging rights.
Yes, that's bragging rights are expensive, by the way.
They are.
So anything else, Bill?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered everything here.
So
I was gonna show some stuff on here.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Come on in here, Alex. So that's the Dynamation program. As you can see, you have your power and your torque, indicated power, brake power, frictional power, pumping power. That's how much it takes for the engine to actually pull the mixture in and to push the exhaust out. You got your piston force, piston speed, ignition timing, volumetric efficiency, mechanical efficiency, fuel efficiency, and it's got a bunch of other stuff here that comes in handy. Mass flow, that's how much air is going into the cylinder. Believe it or not, it's only like 206 grams of air and fuel that go into the cylinder to make that power. That's quite a bit, I guess, when you think about it, you know. Actually, that's 0.00206. So
that's per stroke, right?
That's per stroke.
Per fire.
Yeah. So that's really not that much when you look at it. So this program also will give you a graph. So this is I did this for Alan's son's motor, and there's a graph right there. Now my Dynamation program said it would make 535 horse and 500 foot-pounds of torque. The horsepower is off a little bit, and I think
we made more torque.
You made more torque.
525 or 530.
Yeah, the program isn't totally accurate, but it will give you a direction which way to go. You can put the weather in here, the elevation. Let's just scroll down here a little bit. You can put the cylinder head, port flow in there, the valve sizes. What else we got here? Carburetor size. They have a whole bunch of different intake manifold options. You intake runner length, beginning of the intake runner area, minimum port area, which is very important, and the taper angle. That'll give you a taper angle. It even does forced induction if you want. Bunch of camshaft stuff. So there's a cam manager in here, and you can actually go to the cam manager and you can go to valve event timing, and it shows you the seat. I always go seat to seat timing. Just forget about the 50 thou numbers, because the engine sees seat to seat. It doesn't know.
Exactly.
So intake valve opens, intake valve closes. You can move these numbers all around, and if you move them around and you find more power by moving them around, you will come up with a lobe separation. So you don't start with a lobe separation. You start with doing what the engine wants in the open and closing numbers, and then you end up with a lobe separation. You have your lift. Here's a graph that shows the overlap area here. You have to know the estimated lifter acceleration. You can go auto calculate. It'll do it for you. The only problem is sometimes with some cams, I can take my my cam doctor files and put right in here. If you're doing this just by numbers, sometimes it'll be more aggressive and you'll pick up power, and it's not necessarily the opening and closing number. It's the aggressiveness of the lobe. So I put it on manual a lot of times when I'm trying to figure out the opening and close numbers. I've been using this program. I bought the first one back in 2000. It was a DOS program, and I bought this one in 2007 or 8, I think. So I've been working with it a long time, and it is accurate if you put the right input in. You can also, you got compression ratio, the gasoline you're using, the type of combustion chamber, and then you have all your header stuff here. Header length, inlet diameter, exit diameter, length, the collector diameter, and it'll come up with a pretty accurate number which way to go. Computers are wonderful. We need to use them, because in the old days we never had anything, and a lot of it was guesswork back in the early days. And if you just want to show all these cams,
just make a point, Bill, when you're still at it, is this is not a tool for a beginner.
No, it's not.
Right?
No.
Don't buy it and think you're going to figure it out overnight.
So
right?
there's 25 cams up there that I've gone through with my super stock engine over probably the last 24 years. So that's a cam a year, and I finally settled on something that worked, and it wasn't what the cam designers or the cam people told me I needed. It was far from it.
It just shows you how complex the process is, right?
Yes.
Somebody's trying to figure out in their head, yeah, I think I'll do that, right?
Yes. And the cam guys want to sell you something that they know is going to work. Yeah. And it may not be the ultimate.
Take the safe route, right?
It may not. Yeah, exactly. But I picked up a 1/10 and a half with using this program for my cam.
That's a lot in drag racing. 1/10 and a half.
So like almost 50 horsepower, right?
That's a lot.
Sure. Now I was gonna this crane book. I have an old crane book here. This is going way back, okay. And if somebody has one of those, hang on to it, because you can pick your cam pretty easy that way. So the first thing crane wants you to do is they show you here how to. Can you see this, Alex? They show you how to figure out your cruising RPM and your drive and your rear ratio and your engine compression ratio, which is what Ellen was talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it'll give you a cruise RPM here. And they even tell you how to find your rear axle ratio here, I guess, So, if you're building a car and say you have a 323 gear, and your tire is, say, 26 inches, 323, where are we here? 26. Am I on the right? So that's cruising at 60 mile an hour, you're 2,500 RPM.
Okay.
Which would make a nice street car driving it.
Yeah.
So then you go into, if you have a small block, we'll go into their camshaft stuff here. We'll do their Power Max camshaft. So if you look in here, they start with the smallest cam, 192, 204 at 50, 248, 260. That's basically
Stock cam.
a stock cam
Stock
for
300
a
horse
350.
cam, basically.
The basic RPM range, 1,000 to 4,000. Cruise RPM, 1,600 to 2,200. Compression ratio, 775 to 875. Okay, and as
That's a good point, Bill. Just to point out, there's a point at which your motor's happy to cruise, right?
Mhm.
It likes it. Right?
Yes,
Right?
yes.
And you know, we go to Port Stanley every weekend, you know, for dinner. That's our cruise, right?
Yeah.
So motor's at its, in my case, it's 3,000 RPM, is 65 miles an hour. It just loves to be there, right?
Yep.
And this
is what
looking at your power range, your horsepower range, and that cruiser. I've actually never seen that number before. But
yep. And as you go, you go down in cams. So here's a nice 222, 222 and 222. Alan said that's probably the start of what he uses. Cruise RPM 32 to 36, which is fairly high.
There you go. Yeah.
9.5 to 10.75 to 1, right? Basic RPM range 22 to 52. That would make a very nice street cam.
Yep.
450 lift, set of Vortec heads. That would be awesome. So this book, they did the homework for you, but people don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, for sure. Eh? That's pretty cool. I've never seen that myself before.
Yeah. So if you can find and I think even like cranes no longer, but if you can find a crane book, you could probably learn a lot of stuff from that.
Is crane comp now?
I don't know who bought all crane stuff. I think I don't know if Comp bought a lot of the crane stuff or Howard's did. Somebody bought all the crane lobes. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Now here's the thing from David Vizard. So for his, that's a solid flat tappet, and you can see I've used this before. I guess we'll go with
word out, Bill.
Yeah, I have too. I think David better get me another one. So this chart, we'll just hold it on here for a few minutes. You have your engine cubic inch size here, okay, and you have your duration, your lobe lift. So fast street, that would be probably if you had pretty much a like a nice street driver, and like say you had a 302 cubic inch, 274 on a 110. If you had a 327, it's 274 on a 9, 350 on an 8, 383 on a 6, and 400 on a 5, and 434 on a 4. So you can see how the overlap changes with the cubic inch, and that is the correct way to pick a camshaft. He shows you the advance that you need. These are all single pattern cams, I believe. The advertised duration, the valve lift, it's all shown here. He has 3 different valve lifts depending on, if you want mild or medium or real high performance lift. The rocker ratios are included. That goes all the way up to super race cams, which is, it's fairly accurate. You end up with a cam 294, 265. That's a pretty healthy camshaft, right? So that would work good in probably a 350 drag motor. So that's for the solid flat tappet. And then he has, excuse me, what is he? Okay, so these are more for the big block. That was all small block stuff. And then you get to the big block stuff, and he actually shows you valve sizes here. And as you go up in valve size, as you go up in like 2.190 intake, lobe separation 107. If you have a that's for a 454, 482, 483, 505. You can see how that all changes as the engines get bigger. When you get up to the 581, 632s, lobe separation of about 104. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to argue about that. These are for the street, remember. It's not for race, and it's for 10.5 to 1 compression. So if you had more compression, that would change a lot of this stuff right here. I think David explains a lot of that. For every half a point of compression increase, you can drop it 1 degree or increase it 1 degree lobe separation. So if you're 12.5 to 1, that's going to be quite a bit higher. Or if you're 13 to 1, that's going to be higher. So it's all shown here. So anyway, between the crane Crane and this and my computer program and some other cam books, that's how to pick a cam. So anyway, that's
Good job, Bill. You know, once again, I'll come back to that. Please help us out, like and subscribe. Making videos make sense for us, and we'll keep thinking up new interesting videos that'll help you make good choices. So that's how it's going to have to work.
and we are going to do a quadrijet video someday.
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Bill. So we did the Holly thing in the last, and everybody loved that video, and lots of comments. We want to see quadrijet. So at home, I have just ready for this. First of all, you got quadrijets,
Yep.
right? I got Hollies, and of course Daryl's got a wide selection of Hollies. I got even an Eldebrock carburetor from somebody once, because they're a pretty popular carburetor.
They're
right?
a nice, easy carburetor. Yes.
Yeah,
they go on,
people
they work.
like to use them, and they're pretty common,
Yep.
right? And I used to have a Carter AFB off a 400 horse 409. I'm doing the 409, so they have come with two 4-valve carburetors. I got one of them, and basically, I think Eldebrock is a knockoff of a Carter.
It is,
AFB,
exactly.
basically,
Yep.
right? That's what
Yep.
it is. So next time we get to the dyno, so where are we going to the dyno? We have another budget build. I haven't had any videos about it before. We just haven't had a chance, but we're going to make one here very shortly. Mike Kimball just procured a bunch of stuff for me for it, so we're ready to put it together. It's a budget build, so we're going to go through all the process of that fairly soon. And we got to get a dyno date. I just had to back out of a dyno date last week because I didn't have it ready. So I gave Daryl the day off. He said he didn't mind. So as soon as we get this together, we're going to schedule a dyno date, and we're going to try and have a shootout with as many carburetors as we can. So if you want to know what carburetor is going to work the best for you. Another thing I do when I need to pick a cam, I ask Mike Kimball, because he's supposed to be my producer, but he's doing a lot of research lately. He's collaborating with Bill lots.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And he's doing a lot of picking of a lot of stuff for me lately. He's kind of taken what I taught him and taken it to another level. So we appreciate that, Mike. And thank you,
Yes.
Alec, for all your hard work supporting us, producing this. One more thing to announce. My team's working on a website for Gold Scratch, so watch for that. And we will have on there, if some people are interested, the ability to buy my hat and shirts and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it's just coming together now. We'll let you know about that when we get it going. Anything else, Bill?
I think that's pretty much it.
Hey, thanks for your time.
I'm going to have
Bill.
to get back to work.
Now you're going to have another customer mad at you now because you didn't get any work done today. But
That's okay. That's all right.
We appreciate, Bill. You know, you're an icon, and anytime you get to share with us is appreciated. And now share with thousands of other people. That's the benefit of YouTube.
And thanks, guys, for all the nice comments. I really appreciate it. I don't think I'm anything special, but it's much appreciated, all your nice comments.
You earned
so,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Gold Scratch.